good to be with you. I was telling someone else, we were just talking about how you doing today, and I'm kind of tired today. I was in Kansas City visiting some of my family. My niece had a 4-year-old birthday party, and so we were up there, and then we kind of lingered along, maybe longer than we wanted to, and we ended up not getting back until, I don't know, I got home about 11:15, and then didn't get to bed till midnight. So I'm kind of tired. How are you all doing today? You okay? Yeah, okay, good. It's good, but it's good to be here. It's great to be in worship. I wouldn't change that. We had a great visit with my family, and so it's just so good to be able to do those things. We are beginning a new series today called Short But Sweet. And as soon as I announced that, I had a member in the congregation. He's actually here right now. He'll go nameless because I don't want to call him out. He said, "Oh, Britton, that's so great. They're going to do a sermon series, or you're doing a sermon series about you." And I think it was a short joke is what it was. But also I'm sweet, maybe, so I'll take it as a compliment. How's that? This is not a sermon series about me. This is a sermon series about short books in the Bible. We're going to be looking over the next couple weeks just at some of the shortest books that are present in the New Testament. And though they are short in stature, they have this richness to them. There's the depth there. There's something that we can learn from them. So there's a sweetness, in other words. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next couple weeks. We're going to be in the book of Titus and Jude and Philemon. I was even trying to think if I have ever preached out of these books before, and I'm not sure that I have. I don't know that I have. So that's what we're going to be doing, and we're going to just kind of open ourselves up to the teaching that these books would have to offer. Does that sound cool? That's what we're going to be doing. So that's what we're going to be doing for the month of February. Now, here's the dilemma, is when you have a series that's called Short But Sweet, can I keep my sermon in a good time frame? We're going to see if we can do it, if we can keep my sermons short but sweet. So to begin today, I want to just talk about a study that has been done over the last several years, and there's been lots of variations to the study, but basically what the study does is it takes young children, a lot of times preschool children, and it pits them against their arch nemesis, a marshmallow. And what happens in the study is they will come in, they'll set a child down in a room, and they present them with a marshmallow, and whoever's running it will say, "Okay, hey, don't eat the marshmallow, I'll be right back." And they leave for an unspecified amount of time, and they wait to see if the child will actually eat the marshmallow. And a lot of times, they're just in agony, right? They're filming these kids as it's happening, and they don't know what to do. Some of them will pick it up and smell it and like almost lick it and then set it back down, that sort of thing. And 2 out of 3 times, the kid actually does eat the marshmallow. That's kind of the statistics. And they've ran it in different countries with different kids, and roughly it's about 2 out of 3 times they will eat the marshmallow. And 1 out of 3 times they'll wait. They'll just wait. And so the idea behind the study is that you can we delay gratification? Are we able to have enough self-control to say, you know what, I don't need it right now, I'm going to get it later? Well, I'm here to tell you today that if you're part of a study, maybe it's easy to resist a marshmallow. I think it would be. Like if I knew I was doing some sort of a test, I might think it's weird, but you might want to eat a marshmallow, and it's okay. My kids love marshmallows. We did this thing with our neighbors where we would go and we would set up like a fire pit in our front yard, and sometimes we would roast hot dogs. This was like a weird cul-de-sac sort of thing that we would do. But they would always want s'mores, and so we would get out the marshmallows, and I have to say, I'm not a big fan of marshmallows, but when they were eating them, I'm like, okay, I think I could do this. I'm ready for one. So if you're in the moment, it's okay. I think eat a marshmallow. I am proud to say that I do have enough self-control in my life. There was one particular moment when I was I remember this, oddly. I was in a college class, and my professor had a bunch of candy that he brought to class, and he offered it to different people, and I had just kind of gotten in this mode of where I was trying to eat somewhat right, and then I was running and doing some things, and so I said no. I actually said no, and I remember my classmate looking at me and saying, "Man, you've got a lot more self-control than I do." That's what he told me. I was like, well, maybe in that one instance I did. But so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about self-control, because that's a dominant theme in the book of Titus, and it's less about having control over maybe our dietary desires, right? What we want to eat. It's more than that. Whenever I was a kid, I had this this really kind of love-hate relationship with mini golf. I really enjoyed playing mini golf, but when it wasn't going well, I would rage. I was kind of like a very young Happy Gilmore, if you know that movie. And so when you putt and you hit the ball and it bounces around and does its thing, like I got more aggressive in my putting, which is not good for golf. Golf, you need to have light touches, right? So even if I was close, I would just blow it right past the cup. And thank God my parents were patient with me in those moments, because I do remember at one point when I was a child, they had to pick me up and we had to leave the course because I threw such an epic fit at the mini golf course. So that's, when we're talking about self-control, those are the things that I really want us to think about. So I'm going to be reading a passage today from Titus, and before we get into it, I just want to ask you all, and you can shout this out wherever you are at, is there something that you in your life, just you in your life personally, and you don't have to go too deep here, but you would want self-control over? You wish you had more self-control over. Is there anything that you can think about in your life? Food? Okay, yeah, food. It absolutely is one. What else? Temper. I described that one too, right? People talking bad about the Cowboys. I am proud to say I have been a supporter of the Cowboys this entire time. Have I not, Kayla? I've been pretty good. Mostly, she says. Yeah, mostly. I can get a little mouthy from time to time. I'm sorry. I apologize, Chad. Others? Things that you want more self-control over in your life? What if I phrased it like this? What if I phrased it like, why might the world need more self-control? Where do you see a need in our world for more self-control? Social media is one. That's a good one. Where else? Politics, yeah. What was back here? Say it again, real loud. Just being kind to people. It sometimes seems like we are so reactive, and you get these, don't you think we get these knee-jerk reactions, and you go from 0 to 60 just like that, and there's these sort of angry outbursts. If we have self-control, maybe we would see a lot more kindness in our world. Yeah, any others? Greed? Yeah, like the ability to say, I have enough, and maybe I can share from what I have left over. So that's what we're going to talk about, self-control, which is one of the dominant themes in Titus today. So if you have your Bibles available, I'm going to be reading from Titus chapter 2, verses 11 through 15. And real quick before I read this, Paul, this is a letter, again, from the Apostle Paul. We just got done with a study from the book of Philippians. We're still reading from the Apostle Paul. Anytime Paul writes a letter, he's always writing to a time and a place and a people. So that's the context. And in sharing his letters, we have to try to put ourselves in the place of the people who are receiving the letter at the time to understand how to bring it forward to today. We have to know what's going on in their lives and in their world. And Paul's ministry, the reason why he wrote so many letters is because he had churches all over the place. And so this is almost like putting something out on social media, right? And he could reach a lot of people. So he is writing to this guy named Titus who has a ministry on the island of Crete. Does anyone know where the island of Crete's at? It's this island in the Mediterranean, and you see a lot of Greek mythology and stories in Greek culture that are related around the island of Crete. So that's where it takes place, and on the island of Crete, here's at least the way Paul describes the situation. It was kind of a place of religious diversity, like much of that Roman Empire at that time. But here's what Paul says. This is chapter 1, verse 11 or 12. He says, Cretans are always liars, vicious brutes, and lazy gluttons. So he doesn't actually have a very high view of the Cretans that lived there. And you've even heard that word before. You're a Cretan, right? So this was a place of very low, at least assumed a very low morality. And that's what Paul's writing to. And so he puts this heavy emphasis on self-control. So I'm going to read this from chapter 2, verse 11. So hear these words. Here's what it says. It says, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who himself gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify himself a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. Declare these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one disregard you. So this scripture actually sometimes is read around Christmas Eve. And when you think about what we do on Christmas Eve, we proclaim that God has entered into our world. And so this language in verse 11 where it says, for the grace of God has appeared. When Jesus shows up into our world, it's kind of like grace has appeared in our world. And Paul goes on to say, we are in this season of waiting. We wait for that hope, that blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Jesus Christ to show up again. And what he's getting at here is he's saying, look, we are living in a time of in-between. We're living in this period of waiting. We know that some things have happened, but they haven't already yet been fulfilled. We know that Jesus has came, but that Jesus will return again and fulfill all of God's promises in all of God's great glory. So this is what Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he's a theologian, he said that we live in the anxious middle. So it's the already and the not yet. We live in the in-between of what has happened and what has not yet happened. And Paul actually tells us what we should do while we live in that space. Here's what we should do while we wait. He says that we should live, we should renounce ungodliness, and we should renounce worldly passions. That is like indulging ourselves, overindulging ourselves. And we should live upright and godly lives, and we should also be self-controlled. Now, the interesting thing to me about what he says to do about being godly and more righteous and living that way is we can have conversations around what that means. Like, if you thought to yourself, what does it mean to be righteous? We could come up with a whole list of things and have hours of conversations, couldn't we? But the one thing that he really mentions that sticks out to me more than any other is that language of being self-controlled, because there's some teeth to that. Right? When you say the word self-controlled, I can practically think about how I could apply that in my own life. And this is an emphasis in the book of Titus. You see it time and time again. He mentions it in chapter 1, and then in chapter 2, we just read it. But even before this, he's giving instructions to the people on how to live. To the men in chapter 2, he says, to the older men, so if you're older, you're assumed to be wiser. He says, tell the older men to be temperate, and that word temperate is self-controlled, serious, prudent, and sound in faith, in love and endurance. In a little bit further on in verses 4 and 5, he says, tell the older women as well that they should be temperate, that they should encourage, or they should be self-controlled. They should do those sorts of things. And then it even says, as you're raising your children, in verse 6, urge your younger men and women to be self-controlled. So you see this over, it's mentioned 4 times in just that chapter 2. So when you think about the emphasis in the book of Titus, it's really on being self-controlled. And Paul is surely talking about some moral things here, but what he's really getting at is this idea of a witness. And he realizes that there's a bunch of people who are in the church, they're claiming to be followers of Jesus, and if they're going to claim to be followers of Jesus, it's probably helpful to act a certain way. Because if you act without self-control, it's really hard to know that you're a loving person, that you're a good person, right? So we all here have a witness, and our witness, if we claim to be followers of Jesus, we want to point people to Jesus. We want them to see Jesus in us. That's what a witness means. And we can do that through the way that we speak, our words, and also through the way that we carry ourselves, through our actions. That is our witness. And what Paul here is saying is, look, if we are going to be a witness for Christ, one of the best ways that we can do that, to provide a positive witness for Jesus, is to be self-controlled. It's almost like, you know how sometimes we put those bumper stickers on the back of our car? for our churches or whatever that we're a part of, those things terrify me a little bit because have you ever seen one of those? And then like the person drives by you and they give you the finger and then you see the church sticker on the back of their car? Right? Like it's not a great witness. And in essence, that's what Paul is talking about. If you're going to live and claim that you belong to Christ, then you need to be self-controlled enough to provide that positive witness. Because in that one moment where you lose it, and by the way, we all lose it at some point in time. I'm not claiming that we need to be perfect, but we strive to live those self-controlled lives because in that moment where we lose it, and if it happens more often than it should, people start to say, are you sure that like the love of God is in you, right? So he's urging us to be self-controlled. This scripture, Titus actually reminds me of a very famous scripture from 1 James 19. It says, know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger, right? We can almost gather ourselves before we just react into the world. When I think of being self-controlled, I think of limiting our reactivity to everything that's going on around us. So if you want to practice, or if you want to be self-controlled, self-control is something that you have to practice. It's something that you always have to pay attention to because as soon as you forget about it or you're not thinking about it, it's not at the top of your mind, that's when you are at risk to lose it. So it's really helpful to practice self-control. One of the things that I do with my kids, and this is somewhat popular, I think, in different types of curriculum, but if you have a kid that struggles with anger, you can teach them like methods to release their anger. And so there's a couple different techniques, and you kind of mix like breathing techniques with your body. One of them is the pretzel technique. So if you just extend your arms out, go ahead. You can extend your arms out like this, and you cross them over, and you grab on. If you can't do it, that's okay. Don't worry, because you get all twisted up. That's why it's called pretzel. And then you go like this. I know I'm like watching. Can we do this? And then you're supposed to like kind of clench and you breathe. You go, and you do that 2 or 3 times, and then you can like relax. And so it's like this release of tension. Doesn't that feel nice? A little bit? Maybe we should have breathed a couple more times. So there's the pretzel. There's the balloon that you can do, where you put your hands on your head, and you can, you got it. Joyce has got it in the back. You put your hands on your head, and you breathe in, and then you deflate it out. So you're like a deflated balloon. The more fun way is to breathe up, and then you get to go like this. Kids love that. And the idea is you're releasing tension. The trick with any technique like this is you have to practice it at a time where you're calm, so you know what to do. If you try to just do this in the moment and you are not prepared, it's almost impossible to make it happen. So we'll pull our kids aside and say, hey, let's talk about like the balloon technique, and we'll do the balloon thing. And then when they are mad, we can call their attention to it, and they know what they're doing because they've practiced it. So it takes practice. One of the things that we can do to practice, though, self-control as followers of Christ is to just name whatever it is that we want to focus on, to name whatever it is that we want to work on. So if you could, and you don't have to answer this one, but if you could think about, those areas in my life where I need some more self-control, if there's this one thing that I need to work on, what would it be? Name that thing, and then come up with ways to practice how you could work through it when it does come up, because it will happen, right? There's going to be those moments where that urge or that impulse occurs. And so if we practice ahead of time, maybe we're ready for when we are kind of in the heat of the moment. Does that make sense? When we're there. So one of the best ways to practice, I think, is to learn from Jesus and to learn what he did. Just what were some of his techniques? And Jesus was put through tough situations all the time. People would often come up to Jesus and try to catch him in some type of trap. So they would present him with these scenarios just to see what he would say. And I guess not surprisingly, he was able to navigate those spaces so well. I could see myself being put in those situations where people were trying to trick me and just being totally frustrated and losing with people. I've been there, right? Like, why would you bring this to me? You are intentionally trying to trip me up in front of all of these people. Well, that happened to Jesus a lot. There was an instance where the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, they came to him and they said, hey, Jesus, is it right to pay taxes? And the trick behind the question was, if we pay taxes to Rome, then aren't we denying what actually belongs to God, because God has created all things? But also, if you don't pay taxes to Caesar, like, we could let the Roman government know and we could have you arrested. Do you see the catch-22 there that he's in? And so he actually names in that moment that he's like, why are you trying to trick me? He kind of throws that out there, and then he asks them another question. And he says, he gets a coin and says, whose picture is on the coin? And they say it's Caesar's. And Jesus kind of famously tells them, he's like, pay unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar and pay to God what belongs to God. So he kind of answered in this both and sort of way and navigated it wonderfully. But he took a moment and he just asked a question, right? He almost put it back on them in a way. There's other instances where, like when Jesus was arrested, Peter, one of his disciples, took out a sword and chopped off the ear of one of the guards who was trying to arrest Jesus. And Jesus stopped and actually healed the man and said, nah, that's not what we're going to do. We're not going to fight in that way. Showed pretty incredible restraint in that moment to not resist arrest himself. Whenever he was put on trial, right before his death, he was presented before this high priest. His name was Caiaphas. And Caiaphas said, are you the Christ? He was trying to get him an admission to say that he truly was God. And if Jesus would admit that he was God, then from a religious law perspective, he could be put to death. And Jesus, again, there's another moment where he's put before Pilate. So Pilate is a Roman official, and Pilate says, are you king? And of course, if Jesus says yes to that, then he would be a challenge and a threat to Roman kingship and authority. And so he could be charged for that law. And in both of those instances, he says, it's you who have said that, not me. You who are making these claims, not me. He shows this incredible restraint. The one caution I want to say here is that there were a couple instances, there's at least 2 documented instances where Jesus rages in a way and flips tables. I'm sure you're familiar with maybe some of those. So he is so upset about what's going on in the temple in Jerusalem that he flips tables over because people are selling things. They're selling doves and other things that people might use for temple sacrifice. They're exchanging money because they have to use a certain type of currency, and they're charging them extra to have this money exchange because only a certain kind of money can be used in the temple. So all this sort of nonsense is going on, and he loses it and he flips the tables. And a lot of people will point to that and say, hey, I can lose my temper too because Jesus did. And there is a time and a place for that. I will tell you, there is a time and a place for that. And Jesus did it. But I would make the argument that Jesus cleaned the temple and flipped tables from a place of self-control. He knew what he was doing, and he did not operate his entire life out of anger. It was quite the opposite. So if you are ever in an argument with somebody, yes, there may be the place, there may be the time or place to do that type of thing that Jesus did, but more often than not, Jesus operated from this place of peace and calm. So if we learn from the example of Jesus, what I see in some of those stories is we just need to actually take a moment. Take a moment and think before we speak. That could be take a breath, or if you need more time, it's actually okay to take more time. You might actually share with the person that you're in front of or the group of people or whatever situation you're in. You might say, hey, I'm just going to need a day here because my blood is boiling, and if I speak now, it's not going to be good. Just be upfront and honest. Take that moment, and then when you're ready, share what you have to offer. So wait a moment. Take a breath. The other thing that we can practice is, like Jesus in some of these interactions, we can ask questions. I typically think that about 95% of the struggles that we face in our world are because we are not talking about the exact same thing. We're talking about a completely different subject. So you have to get to the core of the issue. One of the things that my wife and I do since we've been married, we have said we want to fight well. So if we are in a fight, we want to make sure that we're actually fighting about the same thing. So there have been times where it's like, numerous occasions where maybe I dropped the ball I forgot to pick up the kids or something, and then I had to go rush and get them, right? Like, you've had this, that some of these things happen because we're always managing our schedules. And so then she rushes over there, or I drop what I'm doing, and then I go over there because I've messed up. And when some of these types of things happen, sometimes it's the instant, the thing that occurs, but sometimes there is a bigger thing underneath. And often when we get to that, it's helpful. So if she might be upset with me or vice versa, we will get to this place of where, you know what, I'm overwhelmed. I'm just overwhelmed right now, and I feel like you're not carrying your load. And I'm like, oh, that's what it's about. So it's not just about the one instance, it's a buildup of things over time. And if we can get to that place, then we can begin to work through some of the things, and I can see maybe some of my shortcomings and my flaws. I remember a time where we were just so busy, and I felt like I just missed her because we were always like, I would go to the house, and then she would be leaving, and then vice versa, and we were just always crossing paths. And I had to write out a letter and just say, hey, you know what, like, I didn't know how to tell you this, but I was just really sad, and I think it's because I just missed connecting with you. That was it. So that was the real thing, and I was getting maybe mad over some smaller things. So ask questions and fight well. Know what you're actually talking about. The other thing is don't allow yourself to get pulled down to the other person's level. Jesus never allowed himself to get pulled down to the place of the other person, because you will find yourself, when you're trying to maintain self-control, and if you're praying for self-control, you'll see situations pop up where you'll get the chance to put it to the test. You'll get to use it. And the other person will not always be thinking the same way you are. They maybe will have not just heard a sermon about having self-control. And they might have lost it. And so if you find yourself in that place, don't allow them to bring you down. Just be gracious with them. Realize that they might be having a bad day because, hey, in just a few weeks, that could be you, right? So you do your best that you can in that opportunity, and don't let the other person pull you down. Don't let that be an excuse for you to lose it. And the last one is just being clear about your purpose. Knowing why you want to be in control in the first place. Because look, we are all part of something bigger. And it doesn't always have to be about winning the argument or putting that person in their place, because you know what? They're just always wrong and they're always running to their mouth, and it's time that someone finally told them about that. And sometimes we might need to call someone out. I'm not saying we don't need to call someone out from time to time. But like as a parent, sometimes I have to realize it's more about teaching my child rather than pointing out the exact thing that they did wrong in that moment. So knowing your purpose. When you go back to the marshmallow thing, sometimes what they would do on the marshmallow test is they would tell kids, hey, if you would wait just a little bit, you'll get 2 marshmallows. Or if you wait, you'll get something even better. And so if you know that there's a bigger purpose at the end of this, it actually can help us to do the things, to take a breath and relax and wait for the bigger and better thing that's just around the corner. So know your purpose. I want to close with this, and just by being a little bit vulnerable with you. One of the things that I have realized in my life is that I struggle sometimes as a parent, like raising my kids. My kids are very talkative and very active, and it is not uncommon for them to just have some blow-up moments. Like me on the golf course. I know where they got some of this from. I'm not going to throw Ashley out. Maybe she would say some things too, but I know they got some of this from me. And a lot of times I'm really great about staying calm and in the moment. But there are times where my patience wears thin and they blow up and I lose it too. Look, as a parent, and I'm not proud to say it, but I will lose it and I'll yell back at them. And there was a moment with one of my kids in particular, not too long ago, where they had just totally lost it. And we were going back and forth and at it. And finally, I just had to stop and I had to say, okay, sweetie, do you need a hug? And she just came to me and we held each other and we rested there. And man, I wish I would have done that so much sooner. Self-control matters. Self-control teaches us how to live and how to love. And that's my hope for you today. Would you pray with me? Holy God, we thank you for your word, for your help in the way that we can be self-controlled as a people. We pray that you would fill us up, meet us in that place, change us, shape our hearts so that we can live according to your way. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.